I'm not sure how many of you have caught wind of this internet crackdown that's currently taking place in the UK, but it is somewhat alarming because it reflects a broader trend. I think it's worth talking about. Now, in the UK currently, they are now implementing various age verification ID checks across the board for the sake, allegedly, in their own words, of protecting the children from prawn. Now, protecting children from prawn, of course, is a good thing. But the problem here is it goes well beyond this. And if you do some investigation, you see that this doesn't just apply to protecting children from prawn. It applies across the board to multiple platforms, things like Twitter, Discord, Reddit. And basically, they're trying to implement age verification for a variety of internet venues. And it really is just the tip of the iceberg because the UK is not really unique in this respect. Now, there's a certain irony, I do think, to this because the UK, or Britain itself, was sort of the birthplace of conventional notions of freedom, Anglo freedom, right? The Magna Carta, and indirectly, of course, the American Constitution. You could rightly say that historically, in no other country of the world did you have these freedom-loving principles that were so espoused there, not even other European countries. In fact, significantly less so in other European countries. And it seems, to the contrary of this, unfortunately, that the UK now is the forerunner, the head of state, as it were, of locking people down in terms of not just the pestilence, but also in terms of their usage of the internet. And it does seem like a lot of governments are overly concerned about this. Now, all this, again, is framed within the conversation of regulating destructive or negative aspects of the internet, above all prawn, but not just prawn, horrible, horrible websites where people say nasty things, that sort of thing as well. Now, I'm not personally some ultra freedom-loving libertarian that thinks humans should be able to do anything and everything they want to do. That's not my view, and it's predicated on my general view of the human ape, in the sense that I think we're a bunch of stupid animals and we are not aware of most of the things we want or do. We're not privy to the inner workings of our mind, and we are very, very, very likely, in a general sense, to make stupid decisions. But there's a difference, in my view, between regulating something such as crack cocaine or some really powerful addictive narcotic that might help with pain or some issue like that, an opioid, for example, and regulating the internet in a similar fashion. Because ideally, you want as little regulation as possible, if only to allow humans to be able to engage in things they want to do, despite the things I mentioned. Yes, humans are stupid animals, we're stupid animals, but too many constraints don't make this animal particularly happy. But the difference, of course, is in the capacity for destructiveness. Certain types of narcotics, certain types of other things are so destructive you could make an argument for some kind of regulation. Although I know there will be people who will argue that all drugs should be legal and everything across the board should be legal no matter what. I'm not one of those people. This is not the time or place to discuss this. I'm just mentioning the fact that I know that such people exist. But really what this is about ultimately is concern trolls and so-called Karens. And the government is an extension of this. There are various people, personages. For example, I mentioned her a few times, Louise Perry, who is a so-called maternal feminist. I'll talk more about that in a separate video. But she very much wants, for example, prawn to be regulated online and for all sorts of websites related to such things to be regulated because she's very pro-female and she doesn't want the women to be hurt. But it goes well beyond just prawn. Again, that is the pretext for protecting children, allegedly. It's about regulating speech at the end of the day. It's about preventing people from saying things that are unsavory or, in the eyes of many people, untrue. The problem is, in my view at least, even if this were desirable, in the sense of making sure that everyone says, quote unquote, the right thing and everyone is, quote unquote, nice to each other, the internet is a vast, vast, vast place. And it's almost impossible to regulate it all. People will inevitably find corners of the internet where they can say what they want and not feel restricted in doing so. Now, to this end, they have considered, not said they're going to do it, they've considered even cracking down on VPNs. Ultimately, a big part of this is the anonymous nature of the internet, which a lot of people appreciate, myself included, because it allows people, in my view, to be more honest about their actual views of things. The idea, at least in the eyes of the Karens and the governments of the world who are going to participate in this, is that by forcing people to be themselves online, they will toe the line more and no longer speak the things that they would otherwise be inclined to speak. Basically, what they want to do is to turn the internet into a walking simulation of real life where you're generally just very constrained in everything you say. You almost never, in a real life situation, go to a public place, a restaurant, a cafe, a store, a shop, whatever it might be, and hear controversial things. No, it's boring platitudes, right? It's, how's the weather? How is stuff at work? Oh, how is Susie doing? That's generally speaking the trend you'll observe in real life. And I'm pretty sure that's the intention here too. People are in a state of shock, it seems, and I think initially it was shocking, but we've gotten used to it, many of us, that people are so candid and honest online. And I actually think that's a good thing, because how else will you shine a light on the actual truth of things? How else will you shine a light on what people actually feel and think? The reality is, and I've said this many times, prior to the internet, you couldn't learn about, for example, intersex relations. Not really. You only had a very vague compass to go off of, and this compass about men and women was largely predicated on platitudes. Now, you could make the argument that a lot of the manosphere is incorrect in the details and the data that they might spout, and that's probably true, especially these days. But the basic building blocks, the idea, for example, that there are important fundamental differences between men and women, that the relationship between men and women is often very tense and even hostile, that things are not as simple as fairy tales tend to paint and suggest, something that, like I said, used to be the standard breakfast you were fed when it came to relations between the sexes, just as an example. With the internet, that changed. That's why people like Lord Gilbert and other youngins know all this stuff right off the bat, whereas people like me, when I was his age, we didn't know jack squat about that because we couldn't know that stuff. It was simply inaccessible. The problem is simply that sometimes this knowledge comes at a price, at a cost, and this cost is that things become less pleasant. The underlying assumptions people have and how they interact with each other, these too become less pleasant. So you're faced with a choice fundamentally, I think, and that choice is pretty simple. It's basically go back to everyone playing super nice and pretending everything is X way and just not knowing certain things, which is the way a lot of people want it, including these governments, as well as the many Karens out there. Or you just kind of deal with things as best you can, given the state of affairs. I, for one, almost always prefer knowledge over nescience. Nescience is generally, in my view, a worse thing, for me at least. I prefer to know something, a horrific truth, and I have to say, in the course of the last decade or so, discovered many horrific truths. Indeed, horrific truths about my very genetics and my health. But I would prefer knowing these things, ultimately, to just not knowing any of this and blithely parading through life as if everything is perfectly fine and hunky-dory. But obviously, this is just my opinion, my view, my personal inclination, and my personal feelings. A lot of people don't feel this way, which is the reason why a lot of people support these efforts to constrain and to, quote-unquote, regulate the internet. I don't think, as I said at the beginning, regulation is in itself a bad thing necessarily. It just depends on what it is and the degree of it. So basically, if they manage to get this stuff through, and then, of course, other governments follow suit, including, of course, as well, the American government and potentially even Canadian government, then you might have the situation where anything that's relevant on social media will require a photo ID, real information, real name, profession, who knows what else, in order to sort of verify your existence. And the problem here is, again, to the extent that this succeeds, you are fundamentally trapped in a situation where everyone is going to go back to just pretending things are a certain way when it's just evidently not the case. And I also think that beyond the things I've mentioned, this is very much a situation of the toothpaste being out of the tube at the end of the day. The internet has been around for a while, and in terms of internet time, it's been around for centuries. The acceleration you've noticed between, say, the past 30 years and the past 50 years, it's enormous. The internet has only been around for roughly 30 years, give or take. And the internet in the last 5 years versus the first 5 years is crazy. You just have to acknowledge that. So maybe they'll succeed at various things and to varying degrees, and maybe some people will get their wish. But I just don't see this necessarily turning into a good thing. Because again, personally, I value knowing things. I value free exchange, even if it's unpleasant, rather than just sort of faking niceties. And on top of that, there's just sort of basic things that people are interested in sometimes. And one final concern I have here, unfortunately, is government overreach. And that's just a fact when it comes to this stuff. As I said, the idea of regulation itself is not theoretically a bad thing. It's just who's doing the regulation, what are the intentions, and are the intentions good, and to what degree can they even implement good intentions? I just don't trust, in the current state of affairs, large-scale governments to do these things well and to have good intentions, especially when we observe the other things they're doing, which are absolutely harmful to the population. Among some of these things being the complete abandonment of some of the populations they are sworn to protect and help, to opioids and drugs, the support of illegal mass and criminal immigration across the board in various places, whether it's Europe or North America. And it just doesn't seem like they have good intentions at the end of the day. And intentions actually matter. So although, like I said, this will nominally please the Karens and the few people who really think we should go back to a tea and crumpets, everyone's nice to each other era, which, by the way, will never work because the cat is out of the bag, I just don't see this turning out well. But what can I do at the end of the day? I'm a nobody. So there's that. Just my 2 cents, gentlemen. Hope you're doing all okay. Anyway, as always, thank you for tuning in. Many special thanks to my very generous patrons on Patreon and donors on PayPal. You guys are the best. Without you, this channel simply could not exist. Thank you so much. And if you can engage in the usual YouTube jazz of liking the video, sharing the video, leaving a comment, subbing. If you're not yet a sub, it's much appreciated. Maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't. I'm told it does help. Until the next time, may the gods truly watch over you. I'm still alive. Bye-bye for now.
If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.